Okay, we're back in the Gemara, Sugya number 2 on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, line 18. And now we come with a huge kasha, a huge question against what the Mishnah says. The Gemara is going to analyze the procedures and exactly how is it the person, how the kefil gets transferred. And that's what the challenge is based on. Looking in line 18, Maskif la Rami Bachama. Rami Bachama asked a very, very, very strong question. He's found a huge problem with this. What is the question? V'ha ein adam makned davar shalai bala olam. There is a rule that we have in halacha that you cannot acquire something that doesn't yet exist. It's intangible. In other words, it's not what we call a bona fide transaction. If I sell you something that doesn't yet exist, it is not a proper transaction. What's that got to do with what we're talking about? Oh, very good question. When the shomer pays for the item, whatever it is he's paying for, guess what? The kefel that he is acquiring possibly doesn't exist yet. Because when he pays, there is no concept of kefil. All we know is that the item is gone. We don't know if there's going to be kefil ever. So therefore, it would seem, Rabbi Acham is saying, how can you say that the shomer transfers ownership, that the Baal, the owner, transfers ownership to the shomer of the kefil when the kefil doesn't exist? That's the question. Now, you might say to yourself, aha, but I remember very, very well from elsewhere, specifically in Yevamos Daf Tzadik Beis Amud Aleph, or in other places in Shas, where it says that Rav Meir said you can acquire something that doesn't belong to, but doesn't exist yet. But afilu, line number 19, the end of the line, afilu, man, even according to Rav Meir, the Makneh B'Davar Shalai Bala Olam, who says that you can acquire something that doesn't yet exist. Well, it's machlokes. Rav Meir says yes. Even he would agree, and in this case, that you would not be able to acquire the kefil. Why? Hani mili, because when Rav Meir said you can acquire something that doesn't yet exist, please look in, bottom of the page. When is it you can acquire something that doesn't yet exist? Kagoy peris dekel. It's like the fruit of a date palm. Why? What's the difference? The avidi da asu, because they're almost certainly going to exist. He says that in a situation where it's almost certainly going to exist, then that's a good transaction. No problem. But in our case, now we're on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. Mi yema de mignava. Who says that it was stolen? It might have been lost. That's one strike. Strike number 2. If you're going to say that it was stolen, all right, okay, fine, it was stolen. Mi yema de mishtaka ganav. Who says that the ganav is going to be found? Who says that the thief will be caught in order for him to pay kefil? That's another strike that might not happen. And even if the thief is found, who says he's actually going to have to pay the kefil? Dilma, Maida Mifta. Maybe he'll admit before he is accused, and then, as the rules go, if he admits, then he can go free and not have to pay. Okay, so it's obvious that kefil is not probably going to exist. So therefore, even Rav Meir would say that this situation is a case where you would not be able to acquire the kefil. So now we're stuck with a problem. So how can the Mishnah say that the Baal gives the rights to kefil if the kefil doesn't exist? This is a great question. So now we get into the answer. So a few answers. Line number 3, Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. Amar Rava. Rava says the first answer. So we're going to play what we call mental gymnastics. We're going to be a little tricky with timelines. Naaseh ka'omalai. We make it as if the Baal says. So when they make the agreement of Shmira, when the animal is given or whatever is given at the beginning, it's as if this is being said between the lines. If it gets stolen and you want to pay me, so I'm going to backtrack retroactively the ownership back to right now when you are getting this cow to watch. So therefore, this makes this is a solution. Why? Because now when the kefel, when the shomer pays, we backtrack the ownership to the beginning of the shmira, and therefore all the rights become his right from the beginning. He owns the cow. He's not buying the rights to kefil. He's actually buying the whole cow, and therefore when it was stolen, he was the effective owner retroactively. So that fixes that problem. So it's not buying something that doesn't yet exist. He's actually paying for a cow that did exist. Maskif la Reb Zera says, this doesn't work out so well. Big problem. Why? If so, nami. If that's the case, then even the wool of a sheep and any babies that are born should also belong to the shomer because he got ownership. So any babies that were born or any wool that was taken off in between the beginning of the shmira and it getting stolen should belong to the shomer. But that's a problem. Why? Alama Tanya, we have a brisa that tells us that the shomer doesn't get the wool or the babies. So that doesn't work out now, because if he owned it from back to the beginning of shmira, then he should get the wool and the babies. So Reb Zera gives an answer. He changes Rava's first answer slightly. Rather, Reb Zera says, looking in line number 8, we make it as if he says, we make it as if he said, you get the cow except for the wool and the babies. So there's a condition on the deal. My Pascha. And how can you make such a difference? Is it appropriate? Yeah, sure. Stama de Milsa, generally speaking, Shivcha de Asa Me'ama. Any benefit you get that is not from the actual animal itself, like kefel, a person would give over because it's not tangible. You can't touch it. It's not right. It's just a right. So rights will give. Shivcha de Megufa. But something from the actual animal itself, the person is not necessarily going to give over. That's the babies in the wool. So the owner says, I'm going to give you the rights to the cow from beginning, yeah, but the babies in the wool, no, I'm keeping that because that's actually from the animal itself. So that fixes that. But now we have an alternative of Rava that actually gets rid of the problem to begin with. We're on line number 11. Line 11. There are those who say, Rava. This is what Rava said. Another version. We make it like Rava says, we make it like the owner said. If it gets stolen and you pay me, we're going to backtrack the ownership to just before it got stolen. Why does that help? Because now, if any babies or wool occur between the beginning of shmira and it getting stolen, it's still going to belong to the owner. Perfect. My beinayu. So now we have two answers. What's the practical difference between them? Ika beinayu. Here's the difference. First of all, kusha de Reb Zera. According to the first answer, we had this whole problem of the babies in the wool. Who's going to own it? And we had to make that, Reb Zera had to say, because we're saying except for the wool and the babies, we had to make a little tricky thing. So that's a problem. Even though we have a solution, it's still a problem. So it's a problem with the first answer, Rava. Inami, alternatively, what's the problem with the second answer? Because the second answer doesn't have the problem with Reb Zera. We have another answer, the kaima ba'agam. If the animal was in a marsh or a meadow when it got stolen in an ownerless place, since in an ownerless place, when it got stolen, and the ownership backtracks to when it got stolen, you have to do a ma'aser kinyan. You have to have an action to change ownership. And there will be no ownership action, no transfer, if the animal is in an ownerless place. If the animal is in the shomer's courtyard when it got stolen, then we could say the transfer of ownership happened as a kinyan chotzer. That the kinyan happened because it was in the property of the shomer. but not if it was stolen from an ownerless marsh. So therefore, each answer has a benefit and each answer has a disadvantage as well. That's why we have both answers.